Cago Valachi, hitman for the mob. And the first man to break omerta, the Mafia's code of silence. Valachi was the first to give the world the phrase, cosa nostra. Valachi was the first to reveal the names of the bosses and their soldiers. He explained the Mafia's structure, their rituals and secrets.
It was the first time anyone could pull back the curtain or paint the canvas of what it was like.
Valachi was the first to expose their bloody history of killings and executions. And knew where the bodies were.
You lived by the gun and by the knife, and you died by the gun and by the knife.
Valachi was the first to blow the lid on a secret empire worth $40 billion a year. And his revelations would change the nature of the battle between the FBI and the Mafia forever. In 1962, 58-year-old Cago Valachi was serving 15 years in Atlanta State Penitentiary for heroin trafficking. And inside with him was his Mafia boss of 30 years, Don Vito Genovese, head of one of the most powerful crime families in America.
Joe went back a long time with Vito. He was in one of Vito's crews, so they knew each other very well, and he always thought he was in Vito's good graces. But Vito was a homicidal maniac.
One day, Vito Genovese arranged for Valachi to be his cellmate. Genovese could do this because he controlled the prison wings with fear and intimidation. Valachi guessed something was up and had good reason to be nervous. Genovese believed that Valachi had put him in prison after squealing to the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. One night, Genovese turned to his cellmate.
You know, we take a barrel of apples, and in this barrel of apples there might be a bad apple. Well, this apple has to be removed, and if it ain't removed, it would hurt the rest of the apples.
Then, Genovese walked over to Valachi and kissed him on the cheek. It was the Mafia's kiss of death. To let Valachi know he was the apple to be removed.
Joe Valachi knew what this meant. It meant he was now going to be killed. One way or the other, Vito was out to get him.
Consumed with fear, Valachi saw hitmen everywhere. On the morning of June the 22nd, 1962, he was out in the yard when he saw 3 prisoners coming towards him. Thinking they had been sent by Genovese to kill him, he picked up an iron pipe left by construction workers and braced himself for the attack. Then, another inmate approached him. Valachi swung into action. Valachi's victim was John Joseph Saup, a small-time crook with no Mafia connections. Valachi had killed the wrong man. And he was now facing the death sentence for murder.
Here he is, he's trapped, there's no way out for him. So he sends word to the federal authority that he's willing to sing, come a canary.
To save his skin, Valachi got word to the US Justice Department that he was willing to talk about the Mafia. For Attorney General Robert Kennedy and his staff at the US Justice Department, this was the break they were looking for. Since becoming Attorney General in 1961, Kennedy had pursued a vigorous attack against organized crime. But he had been struggling to penetrate the country's criminal underworld. Now, for the first time in the history of the Mafia, an insider was willing to talk. So Kennedy offered a deal to Valachi. He was permitted to plead guilty to a charge of unpremeditated murder and receive a life sentence on the one condition that he would expose his organization. On July the 17th, 1962, Valachi was secretly taken out of Atlanta prison and flown to Westchester County Jail, just outside New York. He was given the cover of Joseph DeMarcona and taken to an isolated cell. FBI agent James P. Flynn was sent to interrogate Valachi and find out what he knew.
Flynn came in and he was tough. He told Valachi, listen, either you tell us what we want to know, or you're no value to us and there's no deal involved.
The FBI had been picking up the phrase cosa nostra on recent wiretaps, and they believed that it referred to the Mafia, the organization, or the outfit. But they weren't sure. To get Valachi to loosen his tongue, he played a trick on him.
Flynn bluffed Valachi. He said, what, we know all about Cosa Nostra.
Thinking the FBI had a deeper knowledge of the Mafia than they actually did, Valachi began to talk.
And he, for the first time, revealed what it really meant. It meant our thing, Cosa Nostra. And he told Flynn, we never call ourselves Mafia.
Flynn started to pump Valachi for names, dates, and information.
The FBI only knew the tip of the Mafia iceberg. They had never really penetrated the organization.
Now, the floodgates opened.
What Valachi gave them for the first time, knowing he had to produce, otherwise he was going to stay in prison for the rest of his life, he had to produce an inside story, really pull the curtain back, paint the canvas of what it was like to be a Mafia soldier in the trenches. So for the first time, he started spilling the beans.
Valachi began to reveal the organizational structure of the Mafia. Based on his information, Flynn drew up charts to illustrate how the Cosa Nostra is divided into family units. Each with a boss, an underboss, and lieutenants and soldiers beneath them.
It seemed to the FBI and everybody else that he was a Rosetta Stone. He was telling them the secrets. The hieroglyphics were now exposed.
Valachi told Flynn that these Mafia families extended across America, from Boston to San Francisco. And for the first time, the FBI got a picture of the Mafia's enormous scope and activities. For the next 3 months, from the end of September 1962, Flynn interrogated Valachi for 4 days a week. An average session would last about 3 hours, and then Valachi would become irritated and difficult to handle. Flynn realized that Valachi's main fear was that he could never escape Vito Genovese. Scarcely a day went by without some reference to his former boss. At times, Valachi would lose courage altogether, thinking he was going to die.
What good is it that I'm telling you? Nobody will listen. Nobody will believe. You know what I mean? This Cosa Nostra, it's like a second government. It's too big. I'm a dead man already, and I know it.
Valachi was right to be worried. According to FBI sources, members of the Genovese crime family were looking for Valachi. From his cell, Vito Genovese had put a price tag of $100,000 on Valachi, and now the mob had traced him to the New York area. The FBI, fearful that the Mafia would get to their prize witness, moved Valachi again, this time to the high-security army base at Fort Monmouth in New Jersey. By the spring of 1963, Valachi wanted to go public and was keen to expose the powerful criminal organization that he blamed for ruining his life.
Bobby Kennedy became aware of his potential as a person who could publicize how big and how important the Mafia was.
But Kennedy had huge concerns about Valachi's credibility. For the past 30 years, he'd been a ruthless Mafia hitman. According to the Justice Department, he had at least 33 murders under his belt, and was also now singing for his life. How could anyone be sure that Valachi was telling the truth? So the FBI decided to use it to test his credibility. Flynn had gathered material for the New York City police during his interrogation of Valachi. The police department had struggled with 30 years of unsolved murder cases, dating back to the Mafia gang wars and the subsequent Cosa Nostra power struggle. Using Valachi's accounts as a guide, the intelligence unit searched the department's files in a precinct-by-precinct operation, checking the scattered and unconfirmed facts against his detailed information. They found that Valachi's version of the gang slayings and killings, including the dates, locations, and the circumstances, could all be verified. In September 1963, Valachi was flown to Washington to face an investigating Senate committee on organized crime across America. Over 2 weeks in October, he would appear as the star witness giving first-hand accounts of life as a Mafia hitman. The hearings were broadcast across the country and became a national event.
No, right here, please. No. No, right there. No, wait, no.
The United States is a new country. We don't have mythology the way older countries had. We had cowboys and Indians, and we had racketeers. This was a way for people within the country to look at all those movies that they had seen before about the underworld and put it all together. I think the public was fascinated by it.
The nation's underworld gets the unwelcome spotlight of publicity as the Senate's Investigations Subcommittee begins new hearings on crime. Arkansas Senator McClelland is at the helm. Attorney General Robert Kennedy paints a grim picture of the rise of lawlessness under the cosa nostra, or Mafia. This he describes as the government of organized gambling, narcotics peddling, extortion, racketeering, and controlling of certain trade unions. He says the income runs into billions.
Well, gentlemen, as you know, we have brought to Queens County this morning the witness, Joe Valachi. We are determined to expose every facet of his testimony and to pursue this thing as far as we possibly can.
What was his demeanor during your conversation inside over coffee?
Apparently, he's a willing witness, and he's anxious to get these things off his chest, and we had no difficulty with him at all.
Did he seem worried at all?
I wouldn't say he was worried. I think the man is naturally, under all of the circumstances, nervous and a bit upset. But beyond that, he's a good witness.
Mr. O'Connor, don't you get the feeling that he's rather enjoying all this?
I would make no comment about that.
As the hearings got underway, Valachi was asked why he had murdered another inmate in Atlanta prison.
Why did you decide to kill him at that time, at that spot?
Because he's the guy I spotted at that time. In other words, I felt that was my last day, in plain English, Senator.
Then Valachi's interrogation really began.
When did you become a member of this organization?
1930.
1930. What is the name of it? It is
Cosa Nostra in Italian.
Cosa Nostra in Italian.
Our thing and our family in English.
Our thing and our family in English.
Valachi then revealed how he came to join the Mafia. Valachi took the committee back to his low-life roots in the slums of New York in the early 1900s. His parents were from Naples, and they had 17 children. Only 6 survived. By the time he was 18, he was the driver with a notorious gang called the Minutemen. They robbed hundreds of clothing and jewelry stores between 1919 and 1923, smashing shop windows and grabbing whatever they could before the cops came. But one day they were caught, and Valachi was sent to the infamous Sing Sing prison on the Hudson River. In Sing Sing, the 21-year-old Valachi made friends with a gangster named Alessandro Volero. It was then that Valachi first learned about a secret organization that he would soon know as La Cosa Nostra. And Valachi wanted to be a part of it.
Now, we talk about myself now. I am a chauffeur, which I've been known through the years, that I was a good driver. In fact, other mobs used to try and borrow me, which I never wanted to go.
Valachi explained to the Senate committee how he became a driver for one of New York's top mafia gangs, led by Sicilian-born Salvatore Maranzano. It was 1929, and Maranzano was locked in a bloody power struggle with his rival, Giuseppe Masseria. Valachi made it known to Maranzano that he wanted in. And as a test, he was sent as the driver on a contract to murder one of Masseria's top henchmen. After the hit, Valachi got the call. He was going to be a made man, or a soldier in the Mafia. Valachi then revealed to the committee the rituals of his initiation ceremony into the mob. Valachi described how he was driven to a country house about 90 miles from New York. Valachi said he was asked to join 30 other members around a table. His boss, Don Salvatore Maranzano, was going to conduct the initiation.
He told him how you got inducted, omerta, the whole code. That once you became a member, you could never leave. How you had to either become an earner or be a hitman, kill somebody before you could even be qualified to be an inductee.
Valachi then revealed to the Senate committee the secrets of the Mafia's blood and fire initiation ceremony into the mob.
Well, he had the knife and the gun on the table. He went on to explain that you lived by the gun and by the knife, and you died by the gun and by the knife.
Did you have a full understanding of what that meant at the time?
Yes, I did.
It meant that you was what?
Well, expect to die by the gun and by the knife.
In other words, when you took that oath, you expected someday to die either by the gun or by the knife.
Right.
That's what you were dedicating yourself to.
Right.
Valachi went on to explain that he was told to make a cup with his hands. Paper was placed inside and set alight. He was then asked to move it from side to side and told that he would burn like the paper if he betrayed the secrets of the Cosa Nostra. Valachi was then introduced to his gomba, his godfather, Joe Bonanno, who would be his guide and mentor. Bonanno asked Valachi for his trigger finger. And pricked it with his tie pin. He then pricked his own and placed it against Valachi's. Maranzano then announced that they are all family now.
All right, then what happened?
Then they all shake hands. Everybody gets up and shake hands. They say a few more words together, which I can recall. They also said, in Sicilian.
But did you know what they meant?
Well, I never asked what it meant. I never did ask what it meant, but it meant like sort of in the style of an organization, or in that style. But you don't bother. I didn't bother. I never did bother.
You never did what?
I never bothered to find out what it meant, but I had an idea what it meant.
Well, you had an idea. What was your idea?
All tied up. We're all tied up.
We're all together.
All together.
All together.
Right.
Sink together, hang together, live together.
Yes.
Valachi's revelations explained why this secret organization had managed to remain hidden for so long. Anyone who squealed would pay the ultimate price. Fear had preserved the silence for 30 years. Now, Valachi had broken that silence forever.
A month of mind-blowing science. All this month on Eden.
Most of Valachi's testimony was devoted to tracing the hierarchy of the American Mafia. Valachi explained to the Senate committee how the smooth-working Mafia organization of today evolved from the warring street gangs and power struggles of the early 1900s. Valachi took the committee back to a meeting in 1931 when Sicilian boss Salvatore Maranzano took control of the New York Mafia. Valachi told how Maranzano laid out his grand plan to an audience of 400 mobsters. That the gangs of New York would now be organized into 5 families to control the boroughs of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island. Valachi told how Maranzano had declared himself the absolute ruler. He would be the boss of all bosses, and if anyone disagreed, they would be killed. Valachi then explained how one man did disagree. And he revealed how Charles Lucky Luciano had Maranzano executed. Luciano then introduced a more democratic form of leadership. He eliminated the boss of all bosses and created the Commission, effectively a board of directors to resolve mafia disputes. And this led to an era of peace, cooperation, and prosperity. Valachi then named the present leaders of the 5 New York families. Vito Genovese, Carlo Gambino, Giuseppe Magliocco, Joseph Bonanno, and Gaetano Lucchesi. These are the men, Valachi told the committee, who run a huge web of organized crime in the city, involving gambling, prostitution, loan sharking, narcotics, and the infiltration of the mafia into legitimate businesses.
And about how many soldiers would usually be under a boss?
Well, Vito Genovese has about 450.
450?
In and around that. Yeah.
450?
About 450. Could be even 500.
Valachi then revealed the names of over 130 members of the Genovese crime family, and identified members of all the other New York families, claiming to know 289 mafiosi. All was laid out for the committee on 5 huge family charts.
I think what Valachi did was explain what the FBI had and didn't know they had. Frequently, people in the mob and in other areas of criminal activity know others by nicknames. They may know their faces, but they don't know their actual names. To the extent that we now had law enforcement had their actual names, we probably learned that for the first time. But other than that, I think Valachi's testimony pretty much stands on its own. I mean, and it has been proven accurate over time.
Those that you have been able to identify in the 5 families, you have marked with stars up on these charts.
Yes. The others that are not on the chart, you know them by aliases, and you didn't know their other names.
Right.
And therefore, you didn't undertake to name them.
Right.
Except that you could give their real name along with their alias.
Right.
Very well.
He was the one who exposed it all. The families, the names of the people, the levels of authority, starting with the capo di tutti capi down to the soldiers.
But there were some critics skeptical of Valachi's testimonies, believing that as a foot soldier, he wouldn't have been privileged to any information relating to Cosa Nostra's inner circle.
I think it is a mistake to think of a soldier as being a low-level figure. They're not. They are serious people within the mob. The only people above a soldier in a direct line of authority is the capo and the boss. So the soldier is a person high up in the mob by the very nature of being admitted to the mob. They are given mob secrets. They are told about what has occurred. They need to know who other people are within the mob because they're free to cross anybody who's outside the mob, but no one who's in the mob. And so they tend to know a great deal.
Valachi used his testimony to get back at Genovese.
I think you might at this time digress just a moment to tell how much power, how much authority the boss, like Genovese, has over the family, over the soldier members like you.
Senator, I happen to know Vito's power. He not only has the power in our family, he also controls the power in Gabina family and the Loquiza family.
In other words, his word becomes law. That makes it legal.
Right.
Can he and does he pass out death sentences?
Well, he passes them out, then they tell you, well, he was a rat, he was this. They tell you anything they want to tell you.
He passes them out.
Right.
You know that of your own knowledge.
That is for sure.
Valachi's testimony was a goldmine. He confirmed Cosa Nostra was the Mafia. He revealed the names of the bosses and their soldiers. He explained their structure, their rituals and secrets. He exposed their bloody history. Above all, Valachi's testimony gave the FBI the targets and led to a change in priorities. By 1963, the FBI's New York office had increased the number of its agents specializing in organized crime from 4 to 140. The following year, the FBI used hidden microphones to record Teamsters union boss Jimmy Hoffa in a series of exchanges with the Detroit Mafia. He was jailed for 8 years. For the FBI, electronic surveillance was the future for cracking down on organized crime.
I remember as a young agent, as a young organized crime agent in the early 1970s, all over the country we did wiretaps of the interstate gambling operations that flourished and were controlled by the Mafia. We made thousands of arrests and broke up hundreds of large gambling combines in an effort to choke off the flow, one of their great sources of money.
Thanks to Valachi's revelations, the FBI's campaign against the Mafia progressed to a new level. Critically, for Attorney General Robert Kennedy, it was just the beginning.
The disclosures of Joseph Valachi and of others with knowledge of criminal operations in various parts of the country have helped to give us unprecedented understanding of how these operations work.
Valachi was the first really important cog in bringing down and destroying, or at least wounding, the Mafia in America. Without him, it might have taken another 15, 20 years, because there were no defectives. Even though he was low-ranking, he still knew enough to sensationalize his story and to get the public really alerted and warned about the threat of the Mafia.
As for Joe Valachi, he was returned to the relative comfort of the District of Columbia Jail in Washington, where he had been kept during the hearings. Robert Kennedy, ever shrewd, believed Valachi had a lot more to offer.
Bobby Kennedy realized that there was a gold mine in him. So what he did was said, why don't you write your memoir, everything you can remember about the Mafia?
Over 13 months, Valachi painstakingly produced more than 300,000 words on notepads from his cell in Washington. He had been there from the very beginning of the modern Mafia, and it was a unique day-by-day portrayal over a 30-year period of his life as a hitman. For someone who had very little schooling, Valachi's memoir was no literary masterpiece.
It's unprintable, it's unpublishable, it's unreadable probably.
Kennedy called for a ghostwriter.
The Justice Department got a writer, Peter Mass, to sit down, use the memoir, and also discuss Valachi's life with him.
This was to form a book which the Justice Department hoped would encourage other informers to come forward. During this period, the department started making plans to reward Valachi for his cooperation, and were even thinking of sending him somewhere to relax in the sun.
Bobby Kennedy had some wild scheme that maybe he could find a girlfriend or bring Valachi's wife and put him on some desert island where he could live out the rest of his life. But that was impossible. And he still had a sentence from murdering that fellow convict, the wrong man.
But killing the wrong man wasn't the only thing stopping him going to a desert island. The Italian-American newspaper, Il Progresso, had got hold of Valachi's manuscript and was outraged. It printed a virulent editorial against the forthcoming book, saying it was perpetuating the kind of image of criminality associated with the many Italian names in Valachi's testimony. This snowballed into a massive surge from pressure groups proclaiming it would slur all Italian Americans. Their campaign was successful. The White House stepped in and halted its publication. Overnight, everything changed for Valachi. He was told the whole thing was off and was hauled out of his Washington comfort zone and transported back into the harsh federal prison system. He was placed in a small cold cell in Michigan, where he was to spend the rest of his sentence in solitary confinement. Valachi despaired. On the morning of April the 11th, 1966, he took the mains lead from his radio and stepped into a shower cubicle. The showerhead was unable to hold Valachi's weight, and he was found collapsed and barely alive on the floor by a guard soon afterwards. The Justice Department realized that they had to look after their prize witness better.
They took him out of the unpleasant northern prisons. They sent him to what they considered the best place for him, a place called La Tuna, near the Mexican border in Texas. And they gave him a suite where he had a kitchenette and he had a better, more comfortable bed. They tried to make life as convenient and comfortable as possible. Whenever the Justice Department now gets a real top-notch defector, they send him to what is called the Valachi suite.
In 1968, and 5 years after he had given away the Mafia's secrets to the world, Valachi finally got to read the book based on his life. It was called The Valachi Papers, and it became a bestseller. Valachi never received a penny from it. The book was turned into a feature film in 1972. Valachi was played by Charles Bronson. The real Joe Valachi died of a heart attack in 1971 at La Tuna Federal Correctional Institution in Texas. He outlived his Mafia boss, Vito Genovese, by 2 years. The $100,000 bounty placed on Valachi's head by Genovese was never collected.